You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. I'm Alan Schimmel. Welcome to Techstrong, gang. So what the heck were we doing in that opening? Well, if you couldn't tell, he was see no evil, I was speak no evil, and he was hear no evil. And that pretty much sums up what we want to do here on Techstrong, gang. We're going to try to keep evil out of it, though evil has a way of seeping into our conversation sometimes. We've got a great gang and some great stuff to talk about today. Let me introduce you. First of all, well, let's do the remote for folks first. Had a little tongue twister there. First of all, joining us from somewhere at sea. He's on his boat as usual. And the Mariner, not the Submariner, but the Mariner. And cybersecurity expert, Chris Blask. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Alan. Good to see you, folks. Yes, I'm anchored off a little island somewhere around Vero Beach.
Very cool. Very cool. I hope it's not too cold that you need the scarf, or is that more of a look?
I'm a cold-blooded person. My wife Donna is on board with me.
Oh, so really? Good for you, Chris.
Yeah. So she's basically in shorts and a t-shirt, and I'm bundled up with mittens. That's just the way it is.
Yep. Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. It's great to have you on. Joining us, I guess, home in San Angelo, Texas, where she's just come off yesterday's Predict 2025 panel that she hosted live. And you can check that out, and you can catch it, well, not live anymore. It can only be live once. But you can watch the recorded version on predict2025.com as well. There's a whole bunch of other great content. It's our special content editor at large, Amanda Razani. Hey, Amanda, how are you?
Great. Happy to be here as always.
Happy to have you on. All righty. And then I'm really happy to be joined here in our Boca Raton studios. The prodigal sons have returned. To my left, that might be your right, our chief content officer visiting us from New York, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, great to have you here.
The great state of Florida was kind enough to issue me a passport so I could be here.
Only for a short period. At 6 o'clock, you're back out.
Didn't stop you at the border.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, he wasn't spouting woke stuff, I guess. But I noticed you wearing some Techstrong swag.
Yeah, this came for the holidays, so I got this little Techstrong group vest thing here. So, you know, I'm still waiting on my gang colors, but I'll wear these in the meantime.
Well, those are our gang colors,
Well,
black and white.
well.
Well, actually, a lot of our gang members will be sporting these. I think we had them sent. But anyway, thanks for being here, Mike. Joining us from Colorado. He's a little less high here. You can tell his eyes are very sharp.
Still high.
You're still high.
Bit of altitude.
Yeah. He, future VP analyst, and our friend Mitch Ashley. Mitch, it's great to have you here in person, man.
It's great to do it in the studio. We always have fun when we get together. So I
Absolutely.
feel like we're men in black, at least partially.
We
on this
do. Yeah, we are sort of men in black today, back in black. I should mention, I did mention that Predict 2025 was yesterday, and it was one of the best, I think the best Predict we've had. It was
really good.
An amazing sessions, amazing speakers. Of course, a lot of them had to do with AI, surprise, surprise. But a lot of it had to do with agentic AI and different aspects of AI. And we had speakers from AWS, some of the other big hyperscalers. We had 3 or 4 folks from Futurum. We had our friend Carolyn Wong and Jennifer Leggio and a lot of, friends, Mitchell, from our cyber days. And so it was all good to have them. It was great, including, as I mentioned, Amanda's panel with our friend Hope Lynch, gang members Hope Lynch and Guy Courier. I guess that was the Techstrong gang.
There you go.
Panel for Predict. And one of the highlights, though, for Predict every year is we announce the DevOps Dozen Awards. And this was the 10th year for DevOps Dozen Awards. We had 8 community categories and 14 tools and service categories. And I'll tell you, we had over 8,000 votes cast for the DevOps Dozen Awards this year. judges were Hope Lynch and Mitchell and myself. And for the most part, we went along with what the audience voted for, though there were some companies, shall remain nameless, who tried to game the system.
No.
Yeah.
In this day and age, gaming the system.
Well,
voting, after all.
well, people don't vote, but these people voted over and over and over again.
Were they in Chicago?
No, those are dead people who vote in Chicago. People who vote multiple times are usually right here in Florida. Anyway, but we did discount those votes. So it was a free and fair election. We had no riots or anything. It went well. I'm really happy to congratulate all of the DevOps Dozen award winners. You can see the award winners on, I believe it's DevOps.com, as well as at DevOpsDozen.com, DevOpsDozen.com. So congratulations to our award winners. Worthy award winners.
Well, we're going to jump into this in the A block, right?
I thought that was the A block.
Well, we normally do a little introduction there, but up to you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, that was our A block. That was the DevOps Dozen Award. Guys, what do you guys think? You saw the winners. You Mitchell and Amanda and Mike, you've been doing this with us for years now. Thoughts?
I felt that this was kind of the winners of the old guard, right? A lot of the vendors who won have been in the category for a long time. So is there something indicative of that where maybe we're seeing fewer startups win, or what's your sense of where are we in this market?
I think it depends on the category, right? When you look at, like, for instance, best DevOps end-to-end product, that doesn't change. I mean, the nominees are always the nominees. You got GitLab in there and CloudBees and JFrog, end-to-end DevOps platforms, GitHub. There's just not that many. Harness. So, that's who it is. But remember also that in those categories, look, we don't nominate the finalists. It's self-nominated and open to people. And then it's who votes for them. So is there a lot of change in DevOps? But I also like to look at some of the new categories because we do add new categories every year. So this year we had several AI categories. We had a platform engineering category. And of course, what I always call the Rookie of the Year, the best new DevOps tool.
Mm-hmm.
So, there were, if you look, some new names and new faces in there. But the fact of the matter is, in DevOps, companies like JFrog and CloudBees and GitLab and Harness, there's a reason why they're leading the space.
I think it's a sign of the maturity of the market. And
It is a little more
companies
mature,
have filled out and added more to their product set of things that they're offering. It's also just a maturity of DevOps.
Yeah.
We're going to be coming out with a new data set for future intelligence around DevOps and AI and development and things like that. And Techstrong research, it's going to come out. I don't know the date yet, but we're working on it as we speak.
56% of the people have not responded.
56% use Crest toothpaste. No, that's a different survey.
Different survey. I'm glad to hear that.
Even our Techstrong research from last year, showed that more people were putting themselves in kind of a later stage of maturity of adoption, of standardizing in DevOps and even mastery level. So, we've been doing this for a while. So I'm not surprised to see some of the same players continuing to do
Sure.
well, as well as new players too.
Absolutely.
And I imagine that some companies, especially the more experienced companies who have been a part of this contest for several years, are pretty good at their marketing and promotion tactics as well.
Yeah, no, there is that. Look, companies that promote that they're finalists and seek votes get votes. People that don't. I'll tell you, though, another theme that I saw this year, there was a category, best use of AI in a DevOps product. We returned nomination fees because we had too many companies that were submitting. Every company is putting AI into their product, right? So that's a new theme too that I don't think we saw last year. Certainly not the year before that, for sure. So I think that was big. Look, it's DevOps, and I think the DevOps Dozen reflects the DevOps market.
I always like the categories involving, who we recognize as kind of the leading evangelists for DevOps. So, who came.
Well,
to
this
mind
year
with
we had two different evangelist categories. One was best community evangelist. So this is not a vendor. And we had two great finalists, and the winner was from the Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, former Soviet Republic, Georgia, DevOps community. His name is Georgi Kashavelli, I believe is his last name. And he won as best community evangelist. He did he does a really great job, right? And more power to him. There was another person from India who was in the finalists there too, was also great and worthy. And then we had the corporate evangelists, right? And look, DevRel has had a tough year, right? A lot of our friends in DevRel don't have their jobs anymore. People are cutting back on DevRel, going back to sales. But there was several, and in that category was actually all new names, all new folks. The winner was from BMC, who, you want to talk mainframes, you want to say they're old guard, but they're out there banging the bushes and collecting votes, I might add, every year in and year out. So more power to them as well. Anything
Good
else?
stuff this year. No,
Good
I think
stuff.
it's DevOpsDozen.com.
DevOpsDozen.com. You can go there. There's an article I put up on DevOps.com with the help of our crackerjack editor, Amanda. So you can check it out there, or you can watch it on Predict 25. All the sessions are still up there.
And nominations for 2026
Will open in August. Please don't start writing me now. But they open in August. All right, let's take a break, and then we're going to come back and find out what's the hottest new podcast on the waves. And I do mean the waves. Stay tuned. We're going to tell you about it. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Modernize your business to fuel innovation and elevate customer experiences. With the Builder Community Hub, AWS and its partner network provide essential tools for transforming applications and infrastructure to fully leverage the cloud. Discover free trials, in-depth demos, and essential resources to empower DevOps engineers and developers to deliver value faster and more reliably. Visit the Builder Community Hub to learn more.
Hey, everyone, we're back here. So, as I mentioned, what's the hottest new podcast? Well, at least on Techstrong TV. Our friend Chris Blask has been building up some content and talking about and threatening us on doing a podcast for a long time. And in between keeping his boats afloat, traveling back and forth to Canada, advising people on critical infrastructure and cybersecurity, Chris has found the time to finally launch The Inevitability Curve. And when I say it's the best podcast on the waves, I literally do mean the waves. He records a lot of the sessions right on his boat with guests from around the world of cyber, and not only cyber, a bunch of stuff. But Chris, give us the scoop about The Inevitability Curve.
So in the early 1990s, I think it was 91, 92, I was living in Canada again, working in a little computer company, and they had an internet connection, right? You use net connection, right? And a dial-up thing. And it dawned on me that everyone on earth was going to get on the internet. And so a little 6-person company, and this is where I got into security shortly thereafter. And the two bosses, the two owners, about our ages, right? Said, "Kid, you don't understand. The internet's for education and military. It's never going to be a thing." And I argued this for a couple of weeks, and I finally went in to John Alsop, John, if you're out there, on his whiteboard and said, let's just assume for a second that I'm right. That in some useful period of time, 10, 20, 30 years, the entire global population gets on the internet. And I put a dot in the upper right-hand part of his whiteboard, and in the lower left it said, we're here. If I'm right, there is already a line that connects us to that future. And multiple lines, but the sales of whatever, right? Things will change along a given pattern if in fact that future is correct. And I've found myself coming back to this over and over and over in my career and realize it really is before all this. This is always the way I've looked at things. It always kind of surprised me that we get so wrapped up in the moment. We can't say the moment is here because we have just gone through all these things. And given that we have gone through all these things to get to this spot, the only possible futures are along some range of trajectories that you can look at, right? So in this series, first one was got up last week. They come out every Wednesday. Heather McMahon, amazing background, just like so many of our peers. It's like, how did you get exactly there? Just that by itself. But having gone through all the phases that she's gone in her career, we talk about marine systems and cybersecurity and cyber systems and automation. It's that gives you a lot of insight into where we're going, right? So I'm looking forward to doing more of these. We have the weekly series, and we're putting together a set of round tables. The first one, end of this quarter, early Q2, we'll have a couple of sponsors. We'll sit down. We'll do the same sort of thing, in a larger group context. With AI, where have we been? How do we get to where we are right now? What useful information about our future can we find inside that? Because I find, with all the things I've done in my career, mostly it's talking to folks like you, where we all have a pretty good understanding of what we're doing and just ferreting out how the heck we got to this, and then looking forward a little bit and saying, all right, given that, we're probably about to do that. So
Very cool.
not that I'm obsessed or anything, but it's a thing.
No one ever accused you of being obsessive, have they?
I hope so.
As you look back over time, how much of the innovations that we have tracked, it wasn't really a technical issue as much as it just was a cultural issue, and it just took a while for the adoption curve to work its way through?
Almost all of it, right? I don't want to get all Isaac Asimov, psychohistory, foundation series on us. We are, arguably, free-willed entities, and we, creatures, we do things because we want to. However, right, when we're doing things, it's usually because we wanted to for a long time, and now's the time. The network address translation, one of my early claim to fames. And I always think, aside from, my own backpatting, I find it fascinating. The 1992, I think it was, we had started building the borderware firewall server, and I talked to some, old Bart, like our age. He's like, kid, you don't understand. There's not enough IP addresses. The internet won't work. And within 15 minutes, with two colleagues, Andrew Flint and Amaya El-Gundi, we invented network address translation. Totally unaware that there was a raging debate among the IETF about network address translation, and two other people were inventing it in parallel all at the same time. Could that have been done earlier? Sure, but it wasn't that time yet.
It reminds me there was a TV series with, I think it's James Burke, Connections, where he walked through history and said, this caused this, led to this, that led to gunpowder.
Well,
that
there's
led
the
to this,
butterfly effect of
Yeah,
that too, right?
It is sort of your inevitability curve of things happen for a reason because of a lot of things that led to that, enabled that to happen.
So I'm thinking, do we start calling Chris Dr. Harry Seldon?
I don't know. But I think that if I knew where the exact points were on the curve, I'd probably be working on Wall Street making a lot more money than I am right now. So,
Well, you had 6.7 gigawatts. You could go back in time and do that there, McFly.
Well, I think it's one of the things I'm looking forward, I'm enjoying actually in this whole conversation is defining what I mean by this, because it's not, the future is not fixed. However, it's less about the things that will happen as more about the things that are not going to happen, right? Not now, not yet. We can't make that kind of curve in that period of time. So it's more about
there's
bounding
almost
the
a quantum
possibilities.
aspect to it, right? Like, the fact that it's there by the very fact of knowing that's going to happen, you're changing it, right? And so it exists in different states and multiverses and all of that craziness that we could get into, even though Jensen Huang says quantum computing is
10 to 15.
Yeah, and all these quantum stocks took a hit as a result. But there is a quantum aspect to it. But let me bring us back to the real world here of relativity and all that good stuff. Chris, the inevitability curve is going to be right here on Techstrong TV, on our network, as well as on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple or Spotify or any of the other places that you listen to podcasts. as part of Techstrong TV. It'll be on the Techstrong TV YouTube channel. It'll be available on all of our websites, as well as LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, if you're still on there. Talk about some of the guests you've got coming on here.
Oh, this is, you know, you mentioned Harry Seldon. You know, I tend to think of Dirk Gently, you know, the Douglas Adams character, everything, the holistic detective. And, you know, you and I talked about this, you know, over the years. It's amazing the people we know, the networks we make. And, you know, Mickey Finneran Dennedy. Yeah, Mickey is just an amazing person. You know, she's also been, she'll be in the early episodes that are already recorded. Phil Engler at the Healthcare ISAC. Phil and I have been leading a CISA working group on ISACs as SBOM distributors. And I'm sorry, there's so many acronyms in there that I can define them all. Hopefully people can pick up most of them. And discussing with him, he's working at the Healthcare ISAC. How do we get threat intelligence out to medical device manufacturers and so on and so forth, right? You know, so, you know, everything from the talking to people, Fred Cohen, right? People have been in the industry. Fred coined the term computer virus in his PhD thesis. So he's that guy, right? You know, these are all the people that that we've grown up with and lived in our careers with, and young and old. I love the fact that people are coming into the industry, and you know, it's easy to get a little pompous. It's like, I've got 30 years, I have 25 years. It's like, look, there are people with 3 years and 7 years of experience in security doing amazing things right now, right? And quite often the things that us, you know, people with too much experience are missing.
You know
Right,
what,
so
Chris? It goes back to something you said a little earlier. It's like we didn't ever want to be those old farts who say, "Hey, kid, I don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about," because there's always some smart kid out there who's going to do network address translation or whatever the next thing is.
And their fresh new perspective to it.
Yep. So
Right. Well, I'll throw out one right. CIA drives me mad. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are not the only 3 protection
the
objectives.
pillars of security.
That's an artifact of the times, to our point. You know, I can tell you exactly how that happened. Fred Cohen and Stephen Northcott and the creation of SANS and so forth baked that in. There are more than 3 possible objectives to security. So, to your point, Amanda, yeah, fresh new eyes coming into this, and not just rote.
How often are you doing new episodes, Chris?
Every week, every Wednesday, there'll be the interview episodes out. The roundtables will be at least quarterly. I think it's a reasonable goal to put those together and get that done.
The quarterlies are sort of live audience roundtables.
Right. Yeah. Get a couple. You know, those would be sponsored. You know, so we'll have some.
Let's talk sponsors. What kind of sponsors you're looking for this? Marketing folks out there, pay attention.
Right. You know, so this, you know, look, I spend a lot of marketing money. You know, again, I am vice president of strategy at Cybeats, and I, you know, do a lot of these roles. I've been a vendor almost my entire career. So there's thought leadership type of stuff, which has a less hard value. But, you know, if you're interested in you know, promoting your image of understanding where you're going, that's a good thing. And if you're targeting these audiences, you know, this is Techstrong. We speak to a technical audience, and obviously I focus a lot on cybersecurity. So cybersecurity vendors are interesting folks, but I've always thought it's more than that. One of the things I love about supply chain right now is though it's security people talking about supply chain, it's really all about logistics and efficiency and so forth. So
very cool.
Technical vendors, and we're happy to try to make you look good if you deserve it.
Excellent. All right. The Inevitability Curve comes out every Wednesday. Check it out here on Techstrong TV, or as I said, wherever you listen to podcasts, you'll be able to find it. Chris, good luck with it. We'll be doing everything we can to help, but I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic discussions there and good stuff. Let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We're going to come back to our C block. I think Amanda's going to kick that one. About AI spending projections. Too early to say it's a failure? Or
I don't think we're saying that. I think it's an inevitability curve issue.
okay. That brings the other in there.
That
was nice, Mike.
You should work in marketing.
He's sharp.
Yeah.
Sharp. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right, folks, we're back. And yeah, going to that whole conversation about inevitability, we all think AI is coming, but boy, there's a huge debate about the when and the where, because a lot of folks in Wall Street are getting a little antsy about how come we're not seeing a huge amount of revenue flowing through these AI products just yet. And we saw UBS now has a survey out where they asked 125 senior IT execs, and they were saying that their spending would drive to the back half of this year, maybe even into 2026, because their businesses just weren't aligned around how to use AI just yet. We also have stories on Techstrong AI. There's a Freshworks report that says a lot of this stuff right now is just being driven from the bottom up. And part of the problem is there isn't enough leadership up top that's kind of saying where we should be driving this conversation. And then NTT has the same thing going on in their survey. And I know you talked to them recently. Everybody seems to be pointing to the same issue, which is it's just taking longer to execute on this than people imagined. But Amanda, I know you've been covering this whole AI space since the early days. What's your take on where are we and what's going on here?
Well, we know every company, practically every person, is eyes on AI and trying to integrate AI in some way. But the problem is, and you can see this on a lot of our articles, is the value is not coming through as expected. And so they're having to cut back on their spending because it's not giving them what they anticipated. So while this is an issue, of course, everybody has to move forward with AI adoption. So what is necessary is good communication and understanding the outcome and having a good plan of action, not just trying to throw things at the wall, having a specific use case, 1 point, 2 points you're trying to solve, and go forward with that first. And I think that we're seeing in a few different articles and interviews, that's the way to go.
I mean, there's overinflated expectations on AI. I'm shocked.
Hype cycle, shocking,
Cycle. Yeah,
gambling
it
going on.
happens.
You know, I have a different take on this.
I'm surprised.
That's me.
It happens.
It's inevitable. But that being said, here's my take, and I'll be honest with you, it's not my take. I think my friend John Willis told me about it. There's a reason why we're seeing it from the bottom up, because the smaller companies, lower down, less money at stake, they're more nimble, they're quicker to adopt, they're quicker to experiment, they're quicker to try. When you get to the companies that USB is repping, or these large enterprises, the inertia built into driving those ships it's the reason why the Titanic sank, right? They can't get out of the way of the iceberg. And so we haven't been in this AI cycle long enough for the enterprises to change the direction of their ship, to overcome that inertia. And that's why we say, oh yeah, we're going to see it in the second half of 2025, because it's going to take at least that long for these behemoths to, look at their budgeting cycles. A lot of them are on fiscal, not calendar years. It starts February 1, June 1, and you can't do a lot of these AI projects if it hasn't really been budgeted. You only rob Peter to pay Paul so much. And so it's going to be the second half of the year at least, until you start seeing budgets at these large companies incorporate some of these AI projects. That being said, though, it's rocket.
I mean, to that point, I've lived this, right? As part of running IT organizations, is something new comes along, you want to start to adopt it and you're not in the cycle, especially in a very large enterprise, right? They're budgeting for 2, 3, 5 years out for projects that are multi-year projects. So what you do in the short term is you kind of rob Peter to pay Paul. You say, let's pull back on spending here. I'll put a little bit of it on AI when I really would like to do more. But it's going to be maybe a year, maybe 2 years before I really kind of are investing the levels that I think I should be investing, especially in a big enterprise. So in the near term, I think people are still in the experimentation phase, learning what they can do, especially with generative AI. They've got pilot projects. We hear about a lot of projects sort of stuck in that pilot phase, not sure how to get it into production. Kind of getting that over the hump, we'll start to see more value. But I think the bottom up is spot on. And, John's experience there, it is very much true that because we don't see the larger investment by IT budgets, people buy their own Copilot license or license to whatever tool that they like to use. But I don't think there's any doubt that it's a big market. It's just not going to happen as fast as we'd love to get an ROI on it.
If I was going to read anything into it, I and don't read too much into my statements, but it seems like the kind of overcorrection you get when it is a real trend, right? We started the show with DevOps, right? 10 and more years ago. Is it really going, would 2025 in DevOps be at the maturity level that all you guys were talking about at the beginning? Nobody knew. But the answer is yes, because that time, it really was time to do the thing. And I think AI, we're at this, early stage, the first couple of years, 1, 2, 3 years. And like you say, Mitch, people are going, I'm actually going to start using that. Whereas in the big corporations, there's healthy functions that try to damp that down. When the enthusiastic, group comes up and says, we need big budget next year, it's like, keep it low. The second year, maybe it goes too high. So I think we're in that overcorrect too much stage of a real trend. Haven't seen any signs of this version of what we call AI not being, frankly, as exciting as it looks.
I think that you have to keep in mind the fact that I would argue half of IT spending is now driven by a line of business unit somewhere, and it's not always in the IT budget. So a lot of those folks might be driving this conversation forward in a way that doesn't necessarily always include the IT folks until they get some level of scale going, and then they dump it back on the CIO and say, hey, look what we did. And
they're funding projects based on outcome-based ROI, what they need delivered, not just we need to invest in A technology versus B.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, one of the big things that predict yesterday was that 2025 we'll see a big move from, let's say, Gen AI to agentic AI. And I think agentic AI, believe it or not, is not as radical maybe as generative AI. Generative AI had a lot of parlor trick, phantasmagical property to it, right? Let me show you what it could do. And you didn't have to be a techie to say, holy mackerel, that's cool as crap. Agentic AI, though, is where work gets done. And I think as in 2025, we start adopting and developing more agentic AI use cases, we're going to see more real, rubber meets the road, meat and potatoes kind of work being done via AI.
Yeah, I agree with that, because a lot of this, stuff where we were handing people like a library of prompts that they should use for different use cases, they kind of looked at that and shrugged and said, I really don't know how to operationalize that inside of my job. But if I have an agent that I can just say, go do this, that's a different experience.
Well,
Yeah, and that was kind of my point is companies need to step back. What's a real solution a real problem that they need to solve, focus on 1 or 2 real problems they need to solve, get the budget for that and move forward.
I think there's a real emphasis. My theme for 2025 is AI in production. Let's get it in there and actually see what
time.
it can do for us.
Right, it's time.
And get out of the.
I did see an interview with Mark Zuckerberg from Meta, of course, who talked about in 2025, they think they're going to replace a lot of mid-level developer engineers with AI stuff.
Benioff is saying the same thing.
Is it? Yeah. So maybe I guess we'll have to wait and see how that comes out. What's the prediction there?
I don't think that's going to be true.
But you heard it here first.
I doubt it.
Heck would predict coming after
It's gonna be
Techstrong
that
Gang.
fast. I doubt it.
We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap us for Techstrong Gang today. we're busy here in Techstrong land in Boca doing our all hands kind of meetings and planning and scheming and thinking about what's inevitable for 2025. And we'll go with that. Chris, I wanted to catch up with you too. It may wait till later this week because I got these guys here. But if you missed Predict 2025 yesterday, it's still up there. Go register and go check out all the sessions. They're all there, including the sponsors, and they have a bunch of great content on their hubs as well. So Predict 2025.
Insurance predictions for 2020.
Oh yeah, and again, Rex, if you register, everybody gets the Future and Prediction 2025 ebook. We'll be emailing that out. It's been a great week so far. We've got a full Techstrong TV lineup on for today as well. And we'll be back tomorrow with even more, as usual, from the gang. But for now, this is Alan Schimmel on behalf of Mike, Mitch, Amanda, and Chris. Thank you. We're out.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Deepak Taneja, who's the CEO for Zilla Security, and we're talking about identity and what makes securing those identities tough, because I think we're all talking about it in the era of zero trust, but I don't think a lot of us know exactly how to go about doing it. Deepak, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
I feel like, and this is just maybe an opinion of one, but in some sense, I feel like we're making a strategic withdrawal, right? We couldn't secure the network perimeter anymore and everything's coming over the top. So we need to find a different tier to secure. And I think we all landed on identity. And of course, we've been trying to secure identities for a while, but maybe we're getting better at it. Maybe it's even getting easier. But what's your assessment of where we are and why are we all suddenly obsessed about identity and security?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, identity's been around for a long time. It's been a business enablement issue, right? Managing identities and giving people access to the applications and data they need to do their jobs. I think what's happened in the last 10, 15 years with the adoption of the cloud is that identity's become, to use a cliche, the new security perimeter, right? So it's I think Rob Joyce recently in the Wall Street Journal article called it the greatest cybersecurity challenge. And indeed, it is becoming the greatest cybersecurity challenge. I think identity by its very nature is built into all aspects of a business. It's how business runs on IT and information systems, and unless identities are managed appropriately, people in the business can't do their work. So that's why it's becoming so critical. And of course, we all have thought of the network as the foundation of enterprise security for a few decades now. The idea has always been keep the bad guys out of your network. Well, there is no network anymore, right? The corporate network is sort of falling apart. When it exists, it's augmented with this cloud and lots of different clouds that organizations are using. So the fundamental sort of construct in security more and more is becoming identity. People are coming in from work, from home, from Starbucks, from the road. They need to get their work done. And how do you help them do that? Well, you figure out the identity of the individual, and then you give them access. You give them the right access. Give them the access they need to do their jobs. And that's why identity is becoming so critical.
So what makes it hard to manage that? Because on a certain level, we've been asking, who goes there since the caveman first grunted. So, what makes managing identity so difficult in the current age of IT?
Yeah, right. So I think we've been trying to manage identities for a while, but it all starts with figuring out if this entity, this person is is who or she claims to be, right? It starts with authentication, and to deal with authentication, you need a directory. So that's sort of foundational, and then it goes from there. Well, once you can authenticate someone, then you have to authorize them to access the right application or data. That requires giving them permissions. So now you've got to manage those permissions. And then, of course, there's people who are constantly joining, moving, and leaving in an organization. So you've got to manage those identities and those permissions. And then, of course, there's compliance, because you have to prove to comply with all kinds of regulations. Organizations have to ensure that they review who has access to what, and that becomes another process. So it's, there's what makes all of this difficult and challenging is that identity is all about processes. It's built into the fabric of an organization. And while things like as an industry, we have a pretty good handle on the fundamentals of directories and authentication, we're still grappling with the governance processes. How do you actually deal with compliance? How do you deal with provisioning, joiners, movers, leavers? How do you deal with the security angle, the security posture around identity? And while we're dealing with all of this, while we're grappling with all of these questions, the cloud has created this whole fabric that now involves not just human identities, but non-human identities. And in fact, the non-human identities, service accounts, and so on, tokens, they outnumber human identities by a factor of 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 in many organizations. So it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem, right? All those, if you're going to govern just human identities, and the access that human identities have, that's not enough. Now you've got this problem about non-human identity governance.
And those non-human identities, there might be more of them than there are people, because they're essentially machines and even software components. So it feels like this is a problem of several orders of magnitude greater than people might initially realize.
That is exactly right. And that realization is starting to hit security teams and security leaders now, right? This is, that cliche I used, identity is the new security perimeter, has been around for a number of years. The implications of that are only now starting to be felt inside organizations. And people are starting to say, well, this identity business is critical, and in fact needs much more importance in our security stack. And in fact, it is the cornerstone of security moving forward, which is not to say that you shouldn't, to the extent that you have a corporate network, you don't need network security, or to the extent that you're using large host systems, Unix, a mainframe, whatever, you don't need host security for them. You still need a lot of different elements of security, but the foundation increasingly is identity.
As we think all this through for a minute, are we too wedded to some of our legacy platforms for managing identity? Because I can go back in time and, there's various directories that are 30, 40 years old technologies at this point. So do we need to rethink the platforms, or can we extend those in a way that makes them still relevant?
Yeah, and that's the challenge that most organizations, particularly large organizations, face. The march of progress is so fast that it's outstripping the ability of vendors to upgrade and update their old products. And this is not new. I think we've seen this in the IT industry for the last 50 years. The problems evolve, and existing solutions, existing deployments inside enterprises can't cope up with the evolution of those problems. And so the challenge is, how do you evolve your infrastructure, your identity infrastructure, to deal with that? And most large companies are trying to figure that out. And oftentimes it's not a rip and replace. It's sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's a question of figuring out what part of the problem your old deployment can deal with effectively, and how do you start to bring in newer tools, newer solutions to deal with other parts of the problem. And then perhaps there's a whole scale replacement over 18 months or 24 months. And we're seeing that sort of thing a lot on the identity governance side in the industry.
What impact do you think AI might have on all of this? Because I could think about it as both a negative and a positive, but it seems like maybe this whole thing could become easier to manage, but then again, the bad guys will be messing with their identities, right?
That's right. That's right. So AI makes things worse in different ways. The very nature of AI, more tools, more services, more applications, all of that implies more identities, more permissions, more to manage, right? And then, to your point, AI can be used against the organization by bad actors. But AI also makes things better. It takes automation to the next level. AI can do what humans can't, and AI can help every stakeholder in an identity management process or an identity governance process. So, we see a lot of benefits accruing from the use of AI, and we're just at the beginning of that cycle. I think there's been a lot of hoopla around generative AI and so on the last year or two, and that's good. I think there's co-pilots and so on that have come out of that can help, but I think AI is also going to fundamentally create some automation that was impossible 5 years ago. And so there's pluses and minuses. I think overall there's a lot more pluses. I think we'll be able to take a lot of what's manual today in identity management and identity governance, and we'll be able to entrust that to AI. Not AI that is completely left to go off and do its own thing, but AI that collaborates with humans but does all the grunt work, right? And that's awesome.
And won't each of those AI agents that's assigned something have an identity that needs to be managed?
Of course, and that's what I said. That's the one of the negatives, that now there's more identities to be managed, more entitlements to be managed. So, that is certainly part of the equation.
Have you given any thought to how many identities each of us has? Because I was just thinking about it before this call, and I was sorting it in my head, and it's like, so I have multiple roles and arguably multiple personalities for different jobs and functions, and each of those has an identity attached to them. So does the average individual, when you start thinking about it, have, I don't know, 10, hundreds of identities?
I think you have to kind of separate the consumer identity of a person from the business identity, right? So from a business standpoint, an organization really needs to be able to think about an employee or a contractor as having a single identity, because that identity sort of represents the relationship that individual has with the organization, the business relationship with the organization. And then that identity might have 50, 100, 1,000 different accounts in the organization, right? And so that identity, your identity, you have an identity, but then if you're using Salesforce in the organization, you have an account inside Salesforce. You could think of that as an identity inside Salesforce, but really it's an account, right? And so what businesses are trying to do across the board are essentially correlate all of this account information that they have about people in the organization, correlate all of those accounts with a single identity, right? And that makes life much easier because now you can say, okay, what does Mike Vizard really have access to across the enterprise? And you can say, all right, Mike Vizard has this title. This is his relationship to the organization, and he has access to 86 applications. And out of them, 30 of them are privileged access, the others are not, and so on, right? Now, that's the business identity. I think consumer identity, it's a little more complicated than that, right? Because now you're dealing with lots of different kinds of businesses out there. Consumers are doing all kinds of things in their lives, and every system that they deal with, their bank has one notion of their identity, their gym has a different notion of their identity. And even there, over time, what we might find is that certainly this is true in some European countries, that there's a government issued identity of some sort that starts to get used for consumers across the board. But that whole area still needs a lot of work.
So what's your best advice to folks, or conversely, what are you seeing organizations that have a handle on all this doing well that others should maybe want to copy or just be aware of?
Yeah. So the thing that I think, first, I think realizing that identity is, by its very nature, different from a lot of other elements of security. So it's not just a security tool that someone on a security team works with. By its very nature, because it's built into all the aspects of a business, there's a lot of stakeholders in identity. People themselves, the employees are stakeholders, their supervisors are stakeholders, the application owners in the organization are stakeholders, the data owners in the organization are stakeholders, the compliance team is their stakeholders, the auditors are stakeholders. So identity needs to be thought of in terms of these different processes that engage multiple stakeholders. And that is fundamentally different. It's, we talked about how identity is becoming the cornerstone of security, and yet it's not like other security tools. You have to think about how you're going to manage your process that might have, 500 or 50,000 stakeholders, right? To give you an example, if you think of an organization with 50,000 employees, and that organization, for compliance reasons, needs to do an access review every quarter. Let's say it's a public company that has to comply with SOX. Now, when an access review happens across 50,000 employees, let's say ballpark 5 employees to a supervisor, there's 10,000 supervisors who are going to be engaged in that access review, right? But to even get that access review off the ground, you need to go bring data from maybe 500 different applications in the company. And you need to bring them in, pull all that data together, then reach out to all these supervisors and get them to do the access review. So it's a very process-oriented view of things. And I think organizations that are dealing with identity well get that. They realize that they need to think in terms of processes. Second, I think organizations that are doing it well realize that historically, identity teams have been separate from security teams, right? The The security operations team, for example, doesn't understand identity in most organizations. And the identity team understands these processes and so on, but they don't understand remediation and immediate response to exposures, identity exposures. The organizations that are doing it well are starting to tie identity operations and identity teamwork to security operations because they realize the key tie-in between those two, right? So that is really important. And then finally, I will say that the companies that are doing it well are giving identity its due importance in their stack. So they're realizing that this is critical and we need to spend money on this. We need to take it seriously. We need to track it carefully. We need to monitor it well. We need to put as much automation as we can into it. We need to get the right tools and platforms in place to make that happen.
If by now you haven't figured out that identities by definition are somewhat schizophrenic, it's pretty clear that that's the case. But the funny thing about it is, it seems like the best way to go about managing them all is centrally, and to figure out some way to put your arms around them all and understand the relationships they have and the dependencies they have with each other, because that is going to be the secret to cybersecurity success going forward. Hey, Deepak, thanks for being on the show.
Of course. Thanks, Mike.
And back to you guys in the studio.
Welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. My name is Cassandra Chen, and today we have Sterling Chen.
Not related.
Yeah, my last name's also Chen. So, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Sterling, and I work for Postman. I'm a senior developer advocate, but in my career, I've been a developer. I've been a junior engineer all the way up to senior tech lead, moved into engineering management, and I love everything career, talking about anything around our careers.
So, you said you have like a passion for mentorships?
I do. Mentorship to me is something that I learned early on in my career. I had a great teacher, a great mentor of mine. And if he ever sees this, his name is Andrew. Shout out to him. He taught me early on that not only talking about how important it is to find a mentorship, to find a mentor, but also to mentor others. And because of that, at every subsequent company that I've worked for, I have started mentorship programs, both official and unofficial mentorship programs that, bring engineers up through the ranks. There's not enough that happens. And so I can take any kind of avenue you want with it. We can talk about, making any official things, what we talk about in mentorship programs. But, for me, the only way to get into your, as you move into your career, is to get mentored. No one else is going to mentor you. No one's going to come to you as a junior engineer and say, "Hey, can I mentor you?" That doesn't happen. So you have to take your career by the horns and say, "I'm going to go find someone to mentor me."
What is like a mentorship actually like? What do you learn? And
it's kind of everything. So the way I like to structure my mentorships is I have a hard, fast rule that they're not someone on my team. Now that sounds a little counterproductive, but if I'm mentoring someone, I don't want them on my team. And that is for a couple reasons. One, I'm assuming that I'm already mentoring people on my team, or if I'm a junior, I'm already getting mentored by the rest of my team, right? I've got senior engineers who are going to be looking at my code. They're going to be working with me on a day-to-day basis. And so they're already going to know a lot about, how I code, why I code, or so on and so forth. So that's my first hard, fast rule. My second rule is that it is an open book. It is completely driven by the mentee. So for me, if I'm being mentored, I'm going to be asking questions. I'm a safe place for mentees to come and ask any questions no matter what. And I think that's why I also have that hard, fast rule that it's not on the same team. Because sometimes as a junior engineer, you feel a little awkward. You're like, that may be a stupid question, or maybe something that a senior engineer on your team has asked, or you've asked the senior engineer multiple times, and you feel embarrassed to ask that question again. For me as a mentor, having I can sit down and say, look, you can ask me any question you want. You can ask me what the quote unquote dumb questions, and know that I'm not going to judge you in any way, shape, or form. I'm here to teach you. I'm here to help you get better to that next level. And so the second aspect of that is that there's always goals in mind. There's always an outcome goal. What are you trying to get better at? Are you a front-end engineer? Then my hope is, as a front-end engineer, I'm going to be teaching you, if I'm mentoring you, for instance, I'm going to be teaching you all the ins and outs of building React components, JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, why you use one thing or another, what's the difference between a for loop and a while loop, when to use them, when to use if, switch case statements. So I see that as a teaching moment. And I take that very seriously. So that was the third part of it. The second one, or the fourth, I'm switching up my numbers here. I think I'm at 4 now. I would talk about is having a regular meeting every week or every other week, and having it for at least half an hour, 45 minutes. It gives you enough time to come in, ask questions, but then it also is not long enough that I'm breaking into like momentum somewhere else. So oftentimes it's afternoons, because most of your meetings are in the mornings. So that's, kind of the structure.
Do you learn from being a mentor yourself?
Oh, 100%. It's why, so the next avenue we were going to go, and I love that you asked me that, is the moment I find someone to mentor, my initial mentor, Andrew, within 2 months, and I was a junior engineer at the time, so I had no idea what the heck I was doing. He came in and said, okay, Sterling, I've mentored you for 2 months. Now you need to go and find a mentee. I asked him, like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm in no way positioned to mentor someone else. And he said, no, every time you teach someone a new skill, you yourself are solidifying it and learning it yourself. So how we did it in my mentor or how we mentored in that case is Andrew would teach me, and then I would teach the people I was mentoring. And so he would talk about regex. He'd go, okay, this week we're going to focus on regex. If I had other questions, he would obviously, I could ask them at that point. But sometimes he'd come up with, say, hey, we're going to focus on regex, or we're going to focus on a skill that you haven't yet mastered. And then the goal at that point was, after he taught me about regex, my job was not to go teach my mentees about regex. And he goes, that act of teaching, it solidifies the skills and the knowledge in your head, because now I have to be ready to answer those questions that I was just even a week ago asking those same questions to him. So absolutely, mentoring is a learning experience for both.
And where can you find a mentorship or be a mentee?
So if you're at one of my companies that I've worked for, I built and integrated full-on mentorship programs within the companies. If not, I would go and actually seek out mentorship. I would find someone that you respect. So if you're at a company and you're on a dev team, I would immediately go find someone within the company that you respect, and just ask them straight up, will you mentor me? I'm looking for a mentor, to someone to teach me, JavaScript, someone to get me to that next level. If you're brand new in the career and you're looking for jobs, the next best place is to start going to meetups. Dev meetups, anywhere you go, there's always going to be teachers and students there. There are going to be people who are in their careers who are trying to pay it forward and give back to the community, and there's going to be people who are there trying to learn from the community. So that's another great resource to find mentorship.
Can developers of all skill levels benefit from this?
100%. Every skill level. If you're a senior engineer, you should be finding a mentor who's someone who's a staff architect, however, whatever the next level is at your company. Or you could be doing being mentored by an engineering manager if you think you want to go into management. Every step of your career. Right now, I'm a senior developer advocate, and I have an active mentor, someone who's not at my company, someone that I've worked with in the past, and I said, and I respected, I've seen what they've done. I said, I'm still asking, I still have questions, I'm still learning. Will you teach me? And so I'm always, on that note, I'm also always actively looking for people to mentor, because I think it's just such a skill that, and so beneficial to everybody.
I think it's really good that we're still learning.
Always. I mean, my parents were teachers. So I grew up in an educator's home, and my dad always told me, life is your classroom, or the world is your classroom. Life is your teacher. And so I take that into everything. Always be learning. There's always something. It doesn't matter who you are. Even if I'm if I'm a senior engineer, or when I was a senior engineer, for instance, I learned from my junior engineers on a regular basis. They had life experiences that I didn't have. And so they would approach problems in novel ways that I didn't look at. So it like I said, I'm always learning. There's always something to learn from somebody else.
So you kind of combined your technology passions and teaching?
Yes, absolutely.
Have you always been passionate about technology?
Yes. I wish I was a little bit more passionate earlier on in my career. So my career path was a little different coming into tech. I spent 15 years in construction and transportation logistics. So I was not doing tech. When I was a kid, I was always been big into video games. I'd take my computer apart. I would try to do soldering. I would do all these things. My dad had tried to get me into doing a CS degree when I was in college, and I said no. I wish I had. But a few years back, I decided to go back to school and become a software engineer. And at that point, I started to I was able to combine my love of teaching into the passion that I now have, or a continued growth of passion into technology.
What do you do today as a job?
I'm a senior developer advocate, which means I get to come to conferences, talk. In this case, I get to speak at conferences, talk about my experiences, share on a larger scale, mentor from the podium.
So it's still related to mentoring?
Yes. I take every time I speak, whether it's on stage at a conference or whether it's within a demo at work, or whatever, I try to instill some type of mentorship in there. Sometimes I'm always a teacher. I'm always going to be a teacher. So it kind of fits in.
When you write your demos for work, is there some form of mentorship in that?
Yeah. So when I'm demoing, I also look at it. I worked on a product team that built an AI assistant inside of Postman. And at that point, I was also having to mentor sales, the customer service department, like the customer success teams, the rest of the field team, talked to DevRel at the time. I was demoing these new products to the rest of the organization, and I had to be ready to answer all of their questions. So that was a really perfect, so even those demos are a perfect opportunity to mentor and talk to others.
I think that's interesting how mentorships really extend everywhere.
Yeah. I find mentorship, again, key to my success, key to anyone who's coming into this industry, key to anyone doesn't even have to be in tech. Find someone who's better at you in some way and ask to have them mentor you. That's how you'll learn. There are, the way I look at it, there's no stupid questions. That's a very teacher, mentor type of thing to say, but I don't find that there are any stupid questions out there. You just have to find someone who's willing to answer those questions for you.
That's really inspirational.
Thank you.
So thank you today, Sterling.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Inevitability Curve. As always, I am your host, Chris Blask. I will have an interesting guest with me today, as hopefully we always do. And we'll pick a topic and look back where we've been. How did we get to where we are right now? What does now even look like? What is today? What's the space that we're currently existing in? And with that, perhaps, what are the range of possibilities going forward? And joining me today is a very good friend and sort of constant working partner these days, Phil Englert. Phil, how are you?
I'm doing well, Chris, and thanks for having me on your episode.
Couldn't be happier. So for everybody else's background, so you can see in the Phil's title, Phil is the VP of Medical Device Security, I believe. Right title? With the Healthcare ISAC, the Healthcare Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And this is a group of organizations that centered around the need to have a U.S. public-private facility to share threat intelligence, vulnerability information around currently, I believe, 16 critical sectors as we define them here in the U.S. So the Healthcare ISAC has been around, probably 30 years now, almost?
Well, since 2010, right? We were formed in 2010. The Health ISAC is a member-driven organization, that specifically fosters the sharing of InfoSec information across the entire healthcare sector, whether it's medical device manufacturers, large pharma, healthcare providers, academic medical centers, health information exchanges, and the like. So if you have a role in patient care, either as a precursor, as in medical device manufacturers, or in direct patient care, or even managing, the transactions that support patient care through insurance and health information exchanges and elements like that. They're eligible for membership. We are about 900 organizations globally, representing almost 12,000 individuals in those 900 organizations. So we like to say we've got 12,000 analysts working for you.
Good explanation. And so let me lay a bit of background. So there was the Industrial Control System ISAC, which is currently dormant, or defunct or whatnot. But I led that with a gentleman by the name of Sean McGurk, who created the ICS CERT and then kicked, some of the functions inside the U.S. federal government, and left, to work with the private sector on that sort of information sharing. And it's been a very interesting path. The ISACs, we'll get into this in the discussion, but the ISACs were basically kicked off in the late 90s by a U.S. federal government recognition and working in the private sector to get this going. These days, normally in this series, I don't talk about my other day jobs, but I am vice president of strategy for Cybeats, that is a software bill of materials and SBOM management vendor company. And that's going to be part of our topic here. So just for transparency, everybody knows what my interests are. And Cybeats and Healthcare ISAC have been partnering, to help get supply chain information flowing through this ISAC infrastructure. And which is more the topic, I think, for today, you and I have been working for the last, over the last couple of years, but, this calendar year has been interesting, working with the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that we pronounce CISA. We've been running a set of Tiger teams, but a set of working groups where we work with our peers in the industry and then the U.S. public sector to try to solve certain issues. And in that path over the last couple of years, there's been a couple of interesting documents. The information sharing side of this, with my ISAC background, I come into SBOMs and supply chain. These are the same sort of thing, same sort of concerns, same sort of mechanisms. I'm thinking we can leverage those. And the artifacts we have to work with now, mentioned 2 specific documents that people can look up if you like. You can go to CISA.gov/SBOM, SBOM. And there is a SBOM sharing lifecycle report that defines discovery, access, and transport, which turns out to be important in the process of sharing this sensitive supply chain information. There's a SBOM sharing roles and considerations document that a working group that I was in last year produced that looks at the author of an SBOM, the consumer of an SBOM, and more to our point here, the distributor, the people in the middle. How do I facilitate access to this information for, it's a perfect example, as an ISAC, for my stakeholders and constituents. And we cycled through putting a process together this summer, and now we're cycling through other information sharing centers to see if we can help them move forward, which plays exactly to everything we're talking about today. So that's a very long intro to say that we're going to be talking about information sharing and threat intelligence sharing and how we've gotten to where we are today, what today looks like and what we can perhaps expect.
Sure. Yeah, and just, to provide a little bit of historical context, right, especially around healthcare. In December of 2022, the Omnibus bill got passed. It included a large portion of the Patch Act, which gave the FDA statutory authority for cybersecurity of medical devices. So this was a huge change. Prior to that, the FDA only had statutory authority over safety. And since, we know that there's an intersection of safety and security, right? But it's a Venn diagram, and sometimes the Venn is a little gray as to exactly how those impacts are because they're not always direct. And with cybersecurity, and particularly in medical devices, it's not always obvious, right? So in that, it precluded or included the need for medical device manufacturers to provide to regulatory agent, the FDA, the regulatory agency, in a submission that an SBOM be provided. So the sub assets of a medical device be identified and declared, and also the threat to the device itself, as well as the risk assessments of the components chosen to provide the clinical functionality need to be addressed and mitigated to a controlled state, right? So there's uncontrolled and controlled state, meaning that it can be managed through either patches, compensating controls, other elements in place. And it does not pose a safety risk to patients or patient populations or staff. So that element was a game changer here. And so when that happened, the Health ISAC saw an opportunity as a trusted source and a trusted venue of security information exchange to extend that to the SBOMs and other security artifacts. So what we set up was with the cooperation of Cybeats, we identified a tool that would allow manufacturers to produce, assemble, and prepare for distribution SBOMs, and then make those available to healthcare providers, and not just member healthcare providers, but any healthcare provider, because not every member or not every healthcare entity is a member of Health ISAC, but we didn't want to preclude the opportunity to distribute, critical information to those entities. So we're sharing from member healthcare organizations to healthcare delivery organizations.
And, the policies that led to that, I'd like to start with that because I think it's a linear sort of thing, right? It's now, some are smacking around 30 years, that I've been asked by journalists, what about this and that? Quite often It's what about this, latest U.S. federal government move or legislation or statement or whatever it is. And I found over the years that I can honestly answer, it's kind of following the evolutionary path that I would have reasonably expected, right? Stuxnet, when the first operational technology cyber attack, against critical infrastructure happened. In this case, a nuclear enrichment facility in the Natanz around 2010. The activity probably started around 2006, and a French La Presse journalist contacted me and tried really hard to get me say, you're living in a glass house throwing stones. And my answer is like anybody that didn't think that right about now in the nation state level, that's the sort of thing you should worry about, or, pro or con, defend against, or use as a tool of statecraft, is missing the point. Right. And what you just said about policy and supply chain, I think is another good example. It's easy for us to say that should have been in place in 1979. It's like, no, I mean, there's no way to explain to the stakeholders, the legislators, their voters, why we need to spend any time and what the answer is. But now we have to. We're getting to the point where we can't keep, for example, the healthcare infrastructure working without that sort of timely, transparent, trusted pathways. So let me get back to the policy parts, right? So there's correct me on this one, I always get this wrong. There was a presidential directive in 1996 or 1998 that started the ISAC.
I think 96.
96.
But don't
and that
quote me
said,
on that.
and to the point that I'm trying to get to here, the interesting thing to me in that of everything else was that what it said, there shall be an singular information sharing and analysis center. And there immediately, as we discussed, turned out there's a bunch of different sectors, and having multiple ISACs focusing on different things turned out to be better. And in fact, the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, the whole structure that the U.S. federal government uses to deal with all of this was built around that experience. By that, taking a step, moving forward, said there should be one, and learning immediately, oh, okay, there should be bunches. And we're still on that path today, leading to exactly what you just said, that in this environment, federal agencies like the FDA can take logical steps that make sense, and require those or provide the opportunities for organizations like ISACs to say, you're right, we can do that, and lines up with our goals and motivations. It's kind of optimistic. We actually got that right.
It is optimistic, and there's the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council, which really is a public-private government collaboration to look at things more at a high level, policy level, if you will. And one of their mantras, is to beat one of us, you must beat all of us. So we know that together we are stronger. If a bad actor is attacking, one member of our organization, and that information is shared, those IOCs are shared out, right, to other members, then they can ingest those into their detect and response capabilities in their own environments, right, and be much better prepared to thwart or respond and minimize the damages. So, the concept of, each of us watching out for each other and helping each other and sharing the information, willingly. We share it in the sticks and taxi protocol, right? There is a bit of safe harbor protection that information shared in the ISACs is, can't be used against the agencies, right? That share that information. And that's a very important point, because it's one of the reasons that we thought, now let's share these SBOMs and other security artifacts between the manufacturers and the healthcare providers that operate them. And having, that we can share this, we share it with an understanding, that it's not public information, it is controlled information, that it's to be used, in its intended purpose and not put out in the public space, but really with the goal of increasing the resilience in the entire healthcare sector.
And it's those sorts of practical applications of policies right? We here in the States need to understand, the impact all these structures we put together, through all our conversations, literally just a bunch of working groups, the sector coordinating councils, as you say, these are people, representing public sector in a sector, representing the private sector, sitting down repeatedly and having conversations and structuring and figuring out the process. This has a huge impact on the world. My involvement, in per sector has been more in the electric sector than healthcare over the decades. And I've watched the creation of the NERC-CIP, the acronym time, North American Electric Reliability Council Critical Infrastructure Protection regulations. Thou shalt, if you're a regulated U.S. utility entity, do these 13 things. And I've watched those evolve, and I've used that with, some of our friends who helped create that to help other nation states put together similar structures. They may have 4 sectors instead of 16 or do things one way or the other, but we keep creating repeatable structures where trusted information can be shared, which in our professional lives is a empirical thing. And in, as we all understand, in the public sphere right now, there's a lot of angst about, right? How can we really know what's real? Well, examples, ISACs. All these different interests, public sector and private sector and nonprofit and for-profit and consumers and distributors can all get down and literally trust each other enough to handle sensitive information in reliable ways that addresses everybody's concerns. Wow.
Yeah, that's an important point, right? It's the ability to share information, and not only security information. When new technologies come out, we are talking about, like Chat GTP or AI or elements like that. What are the policies? What are the constraints? What are the risks of using, Chat GPT, and other artificial intelligence engines in the healthcare environment, knowing that they have great promise to build in efficiencies and provide benefits of patient care, but they're not without risks, knowing that AI is, designed to provide an answer, though not necessarily the correct answer or even the truth, right? So that's a risk in that technology. Caregivers may not understand that. Non-technical people, that are more focused on biology and chemistry and not on electron flow and ones and zeros, may not quite understand the nuances of that. So bringing the entire organizations together, right? Having these discussions, sharing this information, helping people get, to where they need to be faster, by doing it collectively and working cooperatively, is a powerful way, that we enrich the member organizations. We have 24, I think, currently different working groups. One of them is the Medical Device Security Council, where we're the only group in the world that brings manufacturers and healthcare providers to the table to talk about how do we secure the medical device, environment from concept, from the R&D through delivery, configuration, integration, maintenance and monitoring, and remediation and response while it's in, the healthcare environment. How do we take maybe 1,200 different models, makes and models of equipment, and stick them into a single organization's network, that have endpoints counted in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands, and then manage the interoperability so that we're trusting the information and utilizing the information to improve patient outcomes. And I say that, and it's, I go back to accountable care, which incentivized healthcare to generate the data to show that the outcomes they're delivering today are better than the outcomes they were delivering yesterday. And that kind of pushed the whole interoperability. We were taking devices that were basically pneumatic or mechanical devices and putting electronic sensors in them, and then creating these data sets, which we could then analyze what was happening on the device, what were the treatments, what were the utilizations, what kind of protocols did we use for scanning, and taking images, creating diagnostic imagings, and then turning that into and looking at studying that using scientific analysis to determine, can we impact patient care in a positive way? It's a wonderful opportunity. It's why I've been in this business for 35 plus years, because it's amazing every single day, but as we've put this information in and created these large data sets, at the same time, we painted a target on our back. And because healthcare is a very emotional business, we don't care. It's my son, my daughter, my mother. I don't care what it costs. We'll figure that out later. That's, sometimes risk management gets thrown out the window when you're thrown into or drawn into the healthcare sector. And so finding that balance between the promise, of improved care and managing the risks and the, if we were to go back to the IT folks that were often seen as barriers to innovation because of the cybersecurity risks, and that friction, we're now beginning to deal with as an industry. We've learned how to have these strong conversations. We've brought cybersecurity to the board and they understand the risks that are there. Healthcare still pays enormously. Change Health paid a $20 million ransom, within a few weeks of being ransomed, which is unbelievable. If we go back to 2019, I believe it was, when Presbyterian not Presbyterian, but the large healthcare system in LA that got hit in urban, they paid, I think, $17,000 in ransom, so the opportunity for criminals to make money in healthcare is very real. It's very rapid. And so we continue to be a target for that. They say that healthcare is much weaker than, much less protected than other industries. I think a couple of things might contribute to this perception, and I'm not sure that I've seen empirical data that it actually is. But because of the breadth and depth of technology that we have, the breadth of relationships that we have with all these different organizations, just create more opportunities for bad actors to find weaknesses within any system there and exploit those. So it's important for us to, think about these systems in a holistic fashion, but because of the depth and breadth of technologies, the span of relationships that we develop to deliver healthcare, from the acute care centers, to, the laboratories that do special clinical diagnostics, to the imaging centers, to the surgical centers that all operate out, right down to primary care providers that are the first point of entry, to, the therapy centers that you see afterwards, that help you help you finish your treatment regimen, right? All of these connections create, a increase, I guess, our threat surface, right? And we need to think about that. Sharing security information is one way to help organizations really, focus on what's real, what needs to be, what creates the largest risk for those organizations, and help them, to deliver the protections that are necessary to reduce those risks.
And this, we're at that point in the conversation to look at the future. And I think this is a perfect crux, right? Because in the early 90s, when I was getting involved with security and then critical infrastructure, I found I really liked working in, what we call operational technology, OT now, right? And you start looking at the sectors and, I've worked with nuclear power security and everything else. How extreme do you want to get? Right. And things are what they are. And if you want to start in the early 90s dealing with nuclear plant cybersecurity, you're first going to deal with how are we doing it now? Right. And it turns out there's a lot of good lessons in that. Right. But healthcare, I can't, as you're talking, I'm trying to remind me of a conversation. I can almost remember exactly what it was, but it was 1992 for sure. The first time I'm like, yeah, but you're healthcare, which means that the critical infrastructure, you're literally plugging into human beings, not just a generator or a power turbine or a maritime system. And you use terms like teaching hospitals. So you have a university and the infrastructure mixed all together so that the universities are classic hives of hackers, right? Just a very curious bunch, young folks. So we take the most critical thing from a human perspective and mix it with the most hard, and then the networks are mixed up and everything's connected. And all along, this is among, honestly, my earliest inevitability curve thoughts. It's like, well, if someday we address all that, someday we can do not only the things you just said, but take that to 11, right? That device connected to or inside that patient is in real time acting on and trusting information that it's getting not just from a second party, but a 15th party through 17 different connections, and it still works. And we can do that because we will find ways to build the trust, and we'll take as long as it takes. A lot of it will be humans, right? Be building trust with actual organizations and comparing that to how we're doing things already. And based on that, taking a step forward. So what do you think this tells us about the future? What do you think the next, pick a time frame you want, 10, 20, 30, 300 years, where are we going?
So the technology will only continue to advance, right? Every 7 years, I forget the principle, right? That says it doubles every 7 years, right? Like so many things. We know the promise of improved care, the capability to utilize, adaptive learning, machine learning, AI to help evaluate information, pass it along, and shape care delivery is going to be real. And that means more data, right? And so that means more devices that can be, connected to a network, right? With the Patch Act and the other requirements in there, that new technology be delivered, be developed in a safe, or a secure development framework, that there is a mechanism in place to monitor the health of the components after a device is put into the market, and to develop patches and updates to keep those devices cyber secure. The FDA has said, and I don't think this is their quote, but engineering is about making sure that certain things happen, and cybersecurity is about making sure certain things don't, right? And so that's an important concept, right? The ability to build in detection, the ability to have a device that fails safely, so that it doesn't, if it is compromised, right, that it doesn't lose the data that it has, that it can't do something it's not supposed to do, and you made a very important point, right? That, IoT is IoT. The difference between IoT and traditional computing is that it does interact with the environment, that it can either sense the environment or act upon it, right? And whether that's creating energy from nuclear fusion, controlling, floodplains through dams, whether that's distributing power, distributing people through the airline industry, distributing produce or products through transportation, or delivering healthcare, right? In healthcare, the environment is very often the patient themselves, right? So that's people. And again, there's that emotional aspect that doesn't exist in some other industries. So we have a couple of things, right? We need to get better about sharing information, right? We have to think that stop thinking that if I give somebody my SBOM, the hackers will get it, and then they'll know what's in my device, and they'll be able to, tell or find exploits in that, right? So there's two things that have to happen. One, we have to build devices that have fewer vulnerabilities, right? Meaning that we make better selection of components, that we select components that have a longer life, support life in them as we're building and delivering these products into market, that we understand where the risks lie, and we're honest with ourselves, we're honest with our customers about where those risks are, so that we can evaluate those risks, determine whether we're okay with them, right? We do risk assessment every day. We cross the street, it's a risk assessment. I turn left, can I cross? Yes, I'm good to go. No cars coming. I'm not. That's a risk assessment. Doctors do risk assessments every day, right? A patient comes in, they present with symptoms. A physician, will consider what are the treatments that are available, and what they want to do is select the one that provides the best outcome, not necessarily to make you wholly health, but give you the best outcome with the least downside, right? That's risk management. That's what we do in healthcare. And so it requires information to do that. So sharing, SBOMs freely amongst, the makers of the devices and the users of the devices only allows the users to understand, what is the density of certain components in my environment? Where are they? How do they interact with what's critical in order for me to provide healthcare? Not all vulnerabilities, are the same, have the same risk, have that. They may not really impact the functionality of a device, even if they were exploited. And there are devices that don't have an equal weight in producing the healthcare outcome. You can replace, a bear hugger with blankets that come out of a warming cabinet if you want to control a patient's temperature. So there's methods that we can use to get around things that may not be cyber connected to that. And so it's important for organizations to understand what their critical devices are for delivering the mission, right? And then what are the risks within those critical components of mission delivery, and then having plans to respond and recover from those gracefully so that they can get back to the business of mission delivery, should there be an interruption. And it doesn't matter whether that interruption is cyber related, a bad actor, or physical, as in a component failure. We still have to think, if this goes down, what does it do to my ability to do my job? And how am I going to get around it until I can get back to doing it correctly?
Very well said. And I would love to keep saying things with you all day long. And I wish we had more time for this, but for the exigencies of content creation, we should probably find an end to this now. So just want to thank you for all your time, for your time today, helping people understand these things, and have some clarity and some hope for the future, and all the work, you and I have done together, I think makes the world a better place.
I appreciate our collaboration, Chris. It's been enlightening for me. I'm a clinical engineer. I fixed medical devices. Cyber is my second skill. It's my second language, if you will. And so leaning into experts like yourself has been super beneficial. So appreciate that.
Thank you. And thank all of you out in the world, for spending your time with us today. Remember to be kind to yourselves, be nice to the people around you, and look forward to seeing you again in the continually wonderful future.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Good morning, everyone. We are back in 2025, and we are at episode number 66 for Infrastructure Matters. I am here with my buds, Keith Townsend and Dayon Hinchcliffe. Welcome to the new year. And usually this week is kind of quiet, but it seems like some people decided to throw some things up in the wall, and not to mention, kind of call out to our friends in California that are dealing with what they're dealing with, which is very, very tragic. But we're going to kind of pivot over here to the technology side of the house and give you guys a break from watching out what's going on with the fires, et cetera. So with that, anybody get some skiing in or any fun stuff over the holidays?
Just family.
Just family.
Yeah, I didn't get any skiing. I did bring in the new year in camping. We went, we glamped a little bit. So that's not a bad way to bring in the new year.
Back in Tennessee?
Back in good old Hornwall, Tennessee.
Well, I can't say
I work on my accent.
I can't say I glamped. I did though. Did camp and tent camp and et cetera, and biked and hiked in Death Valley. If you haven't been there, it's a fabulous place to go, especially at Christmas time when weather is good, very good. So we're gonna go into this week big show in Vegas. Right off the new year is CES, Consumer Electronics Show. And usually this is not part of the data center infrastructure kind of guys, but nowadays it is because so much of what we deliver as services, et cetera, is through these kind of devices, et cetera. So it's now kind of all blending in. And Jay's got a whole lot to talk about, especially with how NVIDIA stole the show there again.
That's right. Well, while none of us were there, we all we did have folks who were there, including our CEO Daniel Newman, who met I believe with Jensen. It was amazing show. He had a whole raft of announcements. Some of them were consumer and not really related to this show, but unusually for CES, there were some absolutely very very much enterprise relevant announcements. The first significant one was Project Digits. It's a personal AI supercomputer that has 1,000 times the power of a regular laptop. And it's powered by the new Grace Hopper chip. And it's going to be, you're going to see it in data centers. There was already people stacking them up as high as they could go, high they could get them before they started to melt. The compute density of this thing, and it's not really rack mountable, but it's the fastest way to get a big model running anywhere you want it. Anywhere you want to put it. Almost the biggest model you can think of. It'll run, and it's about the size of the new Apple Mac Mini. So it's very small, intense compute density. You'll see it really helping development shops and people actually operationally run some AI. It's and the price point it's $3,000. So it's for 1,000 times more power than you get on a regular laptop. So that was pretty cool, but that was not super enterprisey, although you will see it absolutely in data centers and in businesses around the world, in my opinion. But Jensen came out with a full-size wafer showing that the GB200, the data center super chip that has 72 Blackwell GPUs on it, really exists. It's in production. He was walking around on stage with this single wafer that have 72 interconnected Blackwell GPUs that will form the basis of their massive compute. If you want to go all NVIDIA and get the biggest configuration that they have, you get stacks of this giant wafer with 72 Blackwell. So I see
wafer that's like this big or whatever it is. You're saying there's 72.
Yeah, it's big. It's like 3 feet across. The biggest wafer I've ever seen. And on it is his 72 connected Blackwells. They were made that way on the wafer interconnect.
So they're going to put this in one computer then?
Yes.
Like a mainframe?
Yeah, AI mainframe. I think IBM
mainframe.
Yeah, IBM has something to say about AI mainframes. So to help give some perspective here, the Digix is one Blackwell chip, basically. And that one Blackwell chip has a petaflop of compute capability up to FP4 with the FP4 standard. that enables you. So what kind of real work? That means that it can comfortably handle a 200 million parameter model, a Intel CPU type deal, goes up to about 200 billion parameter model. A Intel CPU will handle about a 75 billion parameter model. So this GB200, 72 times that raw compute performance. So the networking, the memory, everything that needs to be done to kind of to scale that out on a wafer, that's some pretty good computer science.
So way back when, if we're going to go talk about the mainframe again, of course, I will. Some analysts made this huge prediction of how many mainframes would be sold. I think it was something less than 20, maybe it's 15 or something. Who the heck is going to buy this? And I'm not going to say they're only going to sell 15 of them. But so this will be used for the languages, the large language.
Yeah, this is all still just training. So there's a question. We'll get to our predictions over the next few weeks, but I do have a prediction around kind of where AI is going in the enterprise. Enterprise teams are not going to do massive training. They'll do retraining. This is for the hyperscalers, the Facebook, the Metas of the world, the all these companies, Grok, so Xi.
And Microsoft has already announced they have Blackwell in the data center, and you can get special instances. You can specially select that. And this chip is intended for those massive installations. Microsoft just this week announced at $80 billion in CapEx they're going to invest this year in 2025 in their data centers. And of course, a lot of that spend will be exactly on this particular chip.
So it does bring up questions around that we've talked about over the past 2024 around heating, cooling. So power, cooling, and how do you keep these things cool? That is going to be one of the biggest problems. And of course, how are you going to power them? We don't have enough power now. It's going to take, 4 to 5 years to bring on new nuclear reactors. Companies are buying, like Microsoft, are buying coal reactors and putting their data centers next to these coal reactors and taking up all the power from those reactors. It's fascinating arms race around AI.
Wow. But I mean, just as kind of like I'll need to go online and take a look at it stuff because I missed it kind of this week. And I want to see this chip. So you can't even call it a chip. Can you really call that thing a chip if it's like
it's up to 3 feet wide, a chip?
It's a wafer. It's a big, huge, massive wafer. Okay. Yes. What else?
Well, and then finally, NVIDIA announced Cosmos. It's their new AI-friendly world model. What a lot of these large language models, they don't really have a good model of the world. They can make a lot of inferences that are trained up on a lot of incidental information about how the world works, but there's consequently a real need for world models, and it's supposed to be the most enterprise-ready, capable way so you can build true AI-powered digital twins that understand all the physics and all the geometries and everything all about the world. They had some pretty cool demonstrations of AIs wandering around inside Cosmos, interacting with that world as if they were in the real world. It was pretty cool. I don't see that. We'll see that in a lot of simulation, R&D, manufacturing, healthcare, things like that.
And when we get to those world models, I'm assuming that we're going to need these wafers.
Yes. Yeah, all they consume massive amounts of power.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's leading credence that maybe we are in a simulation because we're building equipment that can run simulations. So it is hilarious. This is amazing time to be in technology.
It really is.
Well, on the flip side of all this technology that we're building and the things that NVIDIA is doing, there are some new, you're calling them AI export rules that are potentially coming out or seeing pretty strong coming out from the Biden administration, even before we pass over the baton to the next administration. So, Dion, you want to kind of walk through what's going on? And I understand that there is a massive amount of conversation on this because it's giving some huge angst to companies.
It really is. So the Biden administration has proposed something called the Export Control Framework for Artificial Intelligence Diffusion. And the intent is ostensibly a good one, which is to prevent very powerful AI to getting into the hands of our enemies and being used against us. However, companies like Oracle have come out very publicly against it, saying, I quote, it is one of the most destructive rules to ever hit the U.S. technology industry. And they warned a few weeks ago, but now it looks like it is gone through the interim final rule stage. It is not public. I cannot get access to this because of how it's supposed to be enforced is highly secret. And so it's one to watch. The Semiconductor Industry Association didn't come out swinging so hard as Oracle, but is very much against it. And the prediction is that it would reduce GPU sales in the United States about to 80%. And I think some of that is debatable. The thing is, it's just because it's hard to tell. It's hard to understand what is in it and how it works. It's hard to judge it. But it's basically what the government did with cryptography way back in the day, so that our enemies couldn't keep their secrets from us. And this is something similar. It's like just keeping very powerful AI out of the hands of our enemies. And so it's unclear what will happen if it will make it to actual official enforcement before the new administration comes in, who may very well get rid of it after that. But anyway, it was very much the topic of discussion this week in semiconductor and in AI circles. Is this kind of it's on the fast track and came out of nowhere. I mean, we haven't been tracking this, and this is kind of what we do. So it's very interesting to see what will happen. It's something that certainly our infrastructure friends in the industry will have to watch very closely and try to influence to make sure it does not overreach in it.
Is this specifically on GPUs, or is it on the large language models, or is it what does it cover?
So it's targeted at high risk uses, and it restricts users of very high volume users of GPUs. And so I'm still going through everything that it's trying to control the quantities of GPUs that come out of the United States. And it's a little bit less on the models, because what they're really trying to do is control the ability to even run the models.
Yeah, so this has been highly debated for quite some time, right? There's already GPU controls on who we can export GPUs out of. And China came out with I forget the name of the model, but that hit the news last week. What was a model that works 4 times faster than, I think it was Llama, or the model that mimics. So I think the cat is already out of the bag with some of this. It's a complex question because there's this debate on what controls Congress and the government wants to pass, because I think there's probably pretty good, if I was to guess, looking at the news or at TikTok, there's probably pretty good bipartisan support for something like this. The government and tech leaders seem to be at odds at what's best for technology versus what's best for U.S. National interest. Security interests.
Well, and what it identifies 20 what are called artificial intelligence authorized countries, and they're the ones that can get hardware that can run frontier models. They're the ones that will be able to develop AI, because the concern is, even if we keep our models away from them, the bad actors, they can still build their own. But what if we take that power away too? And so there's only 20 countries that are on that authorized list, and everyone else has very sharply reduced access to any powerful GPUs using this export rule.
And this is coming out of the Department of Commerce, correct? Because they're the import-export folks that are in those organizations.
It is a very complicated. There's a lot of agencies involved in it. It obviously would have to be Commerce, but there's also the Department of Homeland Security, which is a sponsor of it, and things like that.
So this will
this is something to watch, even from change from administration to administration. the folks in Congress are not the friends of technologists right now.
Yeah, right.
Well, it depends.
Anyway,
I think
it's
Bitcoin
it's
is one way out.
fast developing story, and one everyone should be watching to the tech business.
So coming off of the current administration area, which I'm going to try to stay away from that and everything that's going on. We did have, in my world, the data infrastructure world, there's this company, and a lot of people don't know who they are, but DDN, Data Direct Networks folks, they've been privately held. They by Alex and Paul. Very, very, Alex is a very flamboyant Frenchman. I believe he's French. And they've been very darlings in the HPC market. They have traditionally only focused on HPC market or the R&D market. And with AI coming on board, they have just taken off like crazy. And I know from talking to some folks that all they've been doing is pouring money into just ship boxes, which means that's all the inventory and everything else that you're moving. So they've just taken a $300 million investment from Blackstone, which is a private equity, actually publicly traded company, if you want to go look at them. But that brings our valuation to $5 billion, which I think kind of seems like that would be a little low when you think about comparison to some of the other guys that have gone up. But we'll see. I mean, I'm sure what's happening here is that the co-owners are holding their ownership and their power of the company, because it's just been these two guys that have owned it, and it's extremely profitable, et cetera. So it's very exciting to see yet again, another hardware vendor and software vendor that has taken on some big dollars into this market. So it's not just about software anymore. It's definitely
hardware is back big time, and of course, but that's a capital intensive game, and you need to be very well funded for the long term to even play these days.
Yeah. And they've been very, very close with NVIDIA all along, because this has been their market. I mean, this is all they've done. And yes, they bought a company called Tintry, means 5-6 years ago, looked like they were starting to try to expand into some traditional data center space. But with AI taking off, there's really no need for them to do that in terms of their valuation or who the company is. They just exploded on that side. So it's been very, very cool, and a big congratulations to these guys out there. So,
yes,
yeah, and that kind of goes along with. And I guess the other thing we were going to do, we were going to take this session and really kind of go through our predictions for 2025. But with all the things that were going on, we said we didn't have time. So what we're going to do is split it over the next few weeks for each of us to take a section and talk about it. So I had mine ready to go, which is, of course, my first two issues there, and they're more granular in terms of predictions, because there's, yes, the market's going to grow. Yes, data is going to grow. Yes, all these things are going to happen. But it's kind of like, what are the specific things that we're going to start to see that probably weren't part of on our venue in the past? And when I sat down and looked at that, I said, one of the biggest things I think is going to happen is the rise of scale-out file, and they're understanding what we need, the need for parallel file systems and the requirements for AI. And to this time, it's always been a secondary market. It's been a market for R&D. It's been a market for the big labs, et cetera. That's who was, because these were so different. Parallel file systems are not the easiest things to manage to. You had, the ones that I'm thinking about would be Lustre, would be GPFS or IBM Scale, would be BGFS. Some of the guys that are out there. And, it's just not something that somebody wants to go play on. But as we're seeing, each and every one of the vendors are bringing out something to say parallel, scale out, and not just scale out, but parallel file systems. Dell is working on something. You're hearing VAST kind of move in some of those areas. So they have those relationships. Some of them have those relationships with those systems already. But we're also seeing, like, Hammerspace is being put on top of some of these file systems in order to bring a parallel-like activity that's out there. And basically what that means is that the enterprise that's never paid attention to this guy, unless you were a big R&D facility, is all of a sudden saying, I can't get my very high-speed file system, such as PowerScale from Dell or NetApp to perform at the level I've got to make it perform at for AI.
Mm-hmm.
What else is
those file
What-
systems are not designed for that. I mean, yeah, we're dealing in entirely new levels of petabytes of trading data and things like that. It's crazy.
So this next year, I think that conversation is going to rise up. I think the enterprise is going to start saying, okay, so what is this? Tell me more about it. What is the difference between A and B? Why can't I do this with this? So that, to me, is the big rise of that. The second piece of that is the understanding and the tuning in of where objects and file belong in that data pipeline for the AI initiative, where that's going. So we've got the data lake that needs to exist. How is that going to exist in the data center? What's that going to look like? How am I going to afford that? Because we're hearing from the enterprise folks that there's a huge sticker shock in terms of what this is going to look like potentially. So we've got to look at different ways for storing that, because if this side is too expensive, I can't justify the ROI here, but can I not justify the ROI here? So somewhere along the line, there is invention and opportunity in here to understand what's going to happen from these big object file data
Well,
lakes.
I think there's a whole ROI problem in general. I'm looking at all the venture capital firms are putting the graphs together of the expenditure on AI and the expected profits over the next 10 years, and they don't add up. You have to do it, but you have to invest in AI, or you're out of the game altogether. But even $80 billion Microsoft is spending on infrastructure, which is going to involve all those things you're talking about, massive file systems of even greater amounts of trading data and all of these things. Where's the end game? Are we going to see exponential growth in profits taken from all these investments? We don't see that. I'm not sure. It seems like the industry's not heading in a sustainable direction. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think in my experience with file systems in the enterprise, it is very, very, very difficult to get enterprises to change file systems. When you're talking about where they're stored, changing user habits. And in this case, we're probably talking about data scientists. We're probably talking about researchers in the enterprise. And it's and people who are looking to get the data into AI systems. The challenge is that the data, exists on filers and NAS systems, and it's distributed. It's in the public cloud, and trying to get without interrupting users' workflows, getting this data into distributed into some type of parallel file system that's usable and that can use RAG, et cetera, et cetera. I think that will be the challenge of 2025. The need for performance we'll obviously see, but smart folks coming up with solutions that make this as seamless as a transition as possible is the challenge.
And then throw in two of the technologies that are part of this entire AI capability. One is streaming data. If I'm going to do real-time AI with streaming data, et cetera, all of a sudden it brings more complexity to what we're doing to the pipeline. And, we hear, the different folks about how do I adopt the streaming data that's coming in for those decisions. And the second piece of it, which is already part of the environment, is the vector databases. And as as the vector databases get indexed, they grow significantly. And so how do I deal with that? So there's probably invention to be had in those areas from an engineering standpoint as we move forward these next few years in addressing, as you were saying, the ROI, et cetera. The last two that I had on my list is that from the enterprise standpoint, we're going to see continuing decrease of any hard drives there and moving to QLC. That's been driving revenue for these guys and is going to continue to drive revenue for the major vendors as they roll out. So we'll see less and less of those blended boxes that are in there as they come of age, and that will fuel the revenue in those spaces. And the fourth area that I'll bring up is the area of data protection and cybersecurity. That does not leave. Diane, as you well pointed out in your CIO Insights, it is still number one on the list. And We will still continue to look at what do we need to change for data protection in order to improve the recoverability and the speed of recoverability. So there's two pieces there. It's not just making sure that we're safe, but now what they're looking at is how fast can I restore and when I get hit. And then the other piece of that is how do I protect not only the secondary data, but the primary data that's been going on. So we'll see the increase of technology, and that will become a competitive advantage for those vendors that have built into their primary storage those capabilities to protect those devices.
Yeah, and in combining kind of two ideas that you are looking forward to, how do you do this with AI? With AI and streaming data, and now when this secondary data now becomes production data, and the need to protect that from ransomware, from cyber threats in real time, and be able to recover in real time. I think we're going to see, again, your premise that, we're going to see the reduction of hard drives. We're going to need much better I/O, so much better and denser I/O. So 27 terabytes. I don't know if I'd ever say this. A 27 terabyte hard drive just is not enough. It's not enough, and it's too slow compared to the 122 terabytes we're seeing out of the major vendors. There's talk of being SSDs, and going to 256 terabytes of SSDs this year, and the need to just have faster and bigger I/O. It's an amazing set of challenges going into the new year.
The way GPUs are so they can take so much data is how do you get the networks and the hard drives to deliver information and as fast as they can process it? That's the core problem right there. Is you basically have to match the data throughput of the GPUs across the entire data center. That's amazing, and they're going to try to do it.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to see opportunities for folks like Cisco. The Tech Field Day folks will be at Cisco Live EU, and I think that's next month or when we're recording this. And obviously HPE, with its acquisition of Juniper and the ability to have these tightly integrated stacks, Dell has its network stack and this ability to build these NVIDIA blessed stacks, which NVIDIA has competitive networking. So just as you start to tear this apart and we start talking about vendor relationships, the ecosystem, it makes for a really interesting year of, how do we get these engineered systems that we want from our favorite vendors that are blessed by the people who are controlling AI, which is basically NVIDIA.
And then the U.S., our U.S. manufacturer, all of our U.S. customers should consider themselves blessed because they won't fall underneath these export control issues. So if we're going to tie all of these pieces together, they'll have the freedom to acquire whatever they want to acquire and be able to build on those systems. So, wow. Well, that brings us almost to the end of the hour. Any other final comments coming out of any kind of cool stuff you guys got? And we'll wrap up here.
No, I just want to give a hat tip to our fans at Kamawaza. They've been hard fighting. Luke and Matt have been hard plugging, working with our folks in the Signal 65 lab, doing some really interesting AI. They received $11 million in funding from some Seattle-based venture capitalists. This will enable them to continue what the venture capitalist is calling the Docker of AI. So stay tuned from some insights from our Signal 65 labs, from some of the work we've used Kamawaza to help us produce some really interesting research.
So did you say they're located in my backyard?
They're located in your backyard. I think Luke's home overlooks the sisters. So he is I saw it as he was rehabbing, and he worked for a different data-based enterprise data company. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I will have to look him up then. Very cool. All righty, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to share all those good things that we ask you to do as we continue to bring you Infrastructure Matters. And probably the most interesting podcast that you will listen to all week long. All right, have a great week.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this talk. Today, I bring some ideas on how you can shift left the operation mindset and why devs must and how they can implement this from scratch. Because from my experience, years and years working with different companies, I have seen that developers, they are too much focused on the business side. And sometimes they forget that it's important also the operations side to maintain this in production, to maintain this for customers. So I'm going to explain some of the problem from the scratch for you. And then we're going to learn from my failures and my success, right? Some ideas I have to share on how to shift left ops mindset. So who am I? I'm Caio Medeiros, Brazilian, but based in Chile. Now working at Citi. But across my career, I have been a DevOps human and a software engineer. A month ago, I just joined the ambassador program of DevOps Institute. So I'm so happy to be here speaking as an ambassador. But also I participate in some communities like the DevOps Days in Santiago, Chile, where I'm based now, to bring this amazing event here. And also some other communities, open source communities like Open Source Santiago, Platform Engineering, and CNCF. There you're going to find me, right? Here is my picture at the last KubeCon in Salt Lake City. It was an amazing event. You can also find me in my link. So let's start. Let's start understanding or generating a shared understanding of observability. Probably you will see a lot of this in the other talks today, but I want to use my own words, right, from scratch, so to understand all the concepts, right, and have this friend communication between us, right? So let's start from the SDLC issue, right? And in a simple value stream mapping of software development lifecycle, we're going to have customer needs that will turn through this flow to be a product that will be supplying these needs of the customer, right? To challenge the marketplace. And some companies will try to win through this process. Going this from understanding the need, ideating something, developing some software, some solution with technology to later verify and promote this to production. If we go a bit deeper over this flow and we check of the outputs of this software development lifecycle, we're going to see that from the need, we can have an idea. And that idea will be developed by someone inside the company, someone inside the team, having a white box where we'll be able to see everything inside, right? Because we have the code in the development phase. But later, when we move that idea that is being transformed to code, to technology, we're going to see that this white box will turn into a black box where we will not be able anymore to see what is inside, right? We will need to get back to the code to see what is inside. But definitely during the runtime, it will be hard to see what is happening inside. And this same black box from the development phase will go through pre-production, later production to turn into a product and provide some service, some feature to our end customers. That can be internal, external customer, right? But at the end, this black box will be worked by different teams, right? So it's not just a matter of the development team that traditional we have in the development phase that will be able to know what is happening inside, because also they are writing the code. So it's easy for them to know if the software is falling, is crashing, if something is not working as expected, because they have directly the code base, the source code. And also they can debug directly from the code. From the EDE, I can connect my software running and go through each of the lines of code to understand what is happening there. But again, from a traditional organization, we're going to see all these different roles, different teams working across the value stream to finally release this product as a black box to the operation, where they want to probably have some tool gates to ensure that this black box they are receiving is secure, is safe, is reliable, right? So there is a lot of things, right? And also these barriers between the teams that traditionally we have, well known from the DevOps movement as wall of confusion, generating even more disruption across the flow. So going deeper on this concept that is DevOps, that probably you will be saying, okay, with DevOps, I can solve all these problems, right? But the DevOps humans, usually they are too focused on breaking down these barriers, the walls of confusion between teams to make them communicate, right? To speed up the flow from left to right, or even moving these tool gates I mentioned before more to the left to make this fast and better feedback available in the early stages. But the problem I have seen, even as a DevOps human working as a DevOps engineer inside a company or a DevOps lead, is that sometimes we focus too much on implement the automation and implement a lean to remove the wastes of the flow and make it fast from left to right, using a lot of metrics. So there is a set of metrics called DORA, DevOps Assessment and Research and Assessment. That is why I use it, that focus a lot on the reliability of the software that is going through the software development lifecycle and also the productivity. But sometimes we are missing some aspects that is coming from the non-functional requirements that will help us to even remove more of the wastes of the flow, generating a better solution at the end for our end customers. So I brought one of the practices I have used in the past. It's available in the openpracticelibrary.com. That is called non-functional requirements map. Usually I use this practice to help teams inside organizations to identify that there is a lot of concepts and also aspects of the software that sometimes we are not taking in care in the early phases, right? When we are ideating something to supply a need, when we are developing something from an idea, like observability. If we turn back to the example I mentioned it before of the software development life cycle and the outputs of each of these phases, we're going to have our black box, right? Our black box that should be running in production. But what happens if this black box start to fade, right? It start to not work as proper as expected, right? And we have the development team, or even in the organizations that already changed their ways of working and the team structure, where the developers, they are more involved in the operations side. We still have all the business working and running, right? We need to keep the operation up. At the time, we are developing new features to keep competitive in the marketplace. So not always the operators of the software, the engineers that are looking to the software will be able to understand what is happening there in this black box. Because it's not easy to communicate with a software that was developed by someone else, right? I was a developer in the past, so I know that this is a pain, right? Usually we have logs, we have metrics, a lot of monitoring tools. But if we don't take care of on how this black box is communicating to the engineers that were not part of the development process, the black box will be a challenge, right? And it's the normality. Even when we said, okay, we are 13 years ago of DevOps movement, or even observability is not something new, but we still have a lot of developers with this technical debt, right? Teams developing, just focusing on the business. And when we have the black box failing in production, it's hard to know what is happening there, right? It's just like a baby. And when you are parents, or if you are part of family, you know that the babies, they they cannot speak, right, and explain what they are feeling with the specific language we have, right? So sometimes as parents, maybe you will think, where is the handbook? Where is the manual, the guide I can use to understand what is happening there? It's something similar, right? It's not the same, definitely. But when we have this black box in production, we need to have a way to understand what is happening inside, right? Or even in the early stages, right? Something I'm going to talk later. It's super critical to keep this amazing idea that was supplied by the new product developed super fast up and running in production, because you can have the most valuable product. But if that product is not available or reliable in production, your customers will move to another company for sure. So the observability comes with all these different aspects that should be taken in account, even in the early stages when we are ideating some solution. Because ideating is not just a matter of selecting the features that will be used by our customers, but also the architecture. The different standards I should be using to code is part of the ideation and also the development phase. So there, I should be looking to how my application is logging. It's generating proper information to my operators. I would be able to identify what is happening with my black box after packaging everything and deploying in production. Same thing with metrics, tracing, and why not alerting, right? I need to have my alert visible, and they're based on the behavior of my application, my software. But I know there is a world of difference between what is knowing and what is actually needed to do, right? There is a chance from the needs and the product, right? And even have the product up and running all time, reliable in production with all the SLAs, SLO, and SLPs we can set, define, agree, right? So it's important to understand that gap and work with that. It's part of the DevOps mindset I try to promote every time I sharing some idea or some learning. The continuous improvement, the continuous learning, the continuous challenging of the flow, right? So show me how ship left, right? Because we already saw that there is an important aspect of the software development lifecycle, which is how I can talk with my black box in production, my software, which is already packaged, and probably I will not be able to troubleshoot the back, each of the lines of code when it's fading in production. And obviously, I will not be there when it's fading properly. So I need to be able to have the standards defined there and the part of the early stages, right? Because I don't want to fall in production, right? I want to be there, reliable and stable. So, Caio, what do you learn from your failures? What do you learn from your successes? So the first thing is contracts. This is something, it's not something proper only of the DevOps world. It's also something that is connected with a lot of other movements and aspects of the software development lifecycle, IT in general, which is how we are defining our conditions to work together, right? And using Agile and one of the frameworks of Agile, which is Scrum, we're going to see the definition of done there, right? So it's one of the concepts. So if I can align with my developers or my stream aligned team, if we have, team topologies in place and we have teams focused on the value stream, and they have the mindset of if I code it, I build it, I run it, then I can bring the idea of this non-functional requirement, which is observability, to the contract, which is the definition of that. And I can include some aspects of observability there, like standards of logging. Ensure that my developers, they are logging properly based on the standards defined by, an architect inside the organization, right? Same thing using the right agents or the right technologies, right? To integrate with the monitoring tools and ensure that my software, that code that will turn in my black box will be able to express what is happening inside if it fades or even before it fails. So we're going to have the definition of that there, right? And if we are implementing fast iterations, we will be able to even improve the observability in early stages, right? Before to go to UAT, before to go even to pull request from my feature branch to master, right? Because I'm gonna have all these tool gates that usually I learn from the failures in production, why we are operating, learn from them from the beginning, right? The other thing is complement this practice of ensuring that my software is speaking the same language and being able to express what is happening inside with the chaos engineering, right? There are a lot of technologies in the marketplace or even in open source communities we can use to challenge our software in a production-like environment. And using this practice of injecting error there, I will be able to understand if my logs, my metrics are really showing the right information I'm expecting from them. Using small cycles of PDCA with chaos engineering, I will be able to learn from my observability aspect of my software and ensure that in production, at least I will be prepared for the scenarios I defined during my chaos engineering practices. Later, we have platform engineering. It's another huge movement, which is there, right? We have a lot of material in the market talking about platform engineering. The State of DevOps 2023 was based on platform engineering. We already have a lot of communities. I'm part of platformengineering.org community and invite everybody to be there as well. So platform engineering is helping a lot organizations to reduce the cognitive load on developers, understanding that developers, they have an experience path as well. Or even if we go outside of this concept of software development lifecycle, the platform engineering is helpful in any aspect of the organization, of the business, right? But turning back to software development lifecycle, using platform engineering, I will be able to reduce the complexity of my developers to introduce observability aspects in the beginning of the development phase, right? How? With reusable components, tools, platform services, and knowledge base available for them to help them to adopt these technologies, principles, or even standards, like using open source technologies that we have in the marketplace to supply these needs, like open telemetry that have a huge support for different languages to improve the visibility of the software inside this black box, right? Removing the cognitive load of developers to write the right logins, right? That sometimes will make the code a bit more difficult to maintain. Right? So using technologies like this, it's the developers or the different teams across the software development lifecycle will be able to make the baby more understandable, right? And using technologies like Kraken to do chaos engineering, they will be able even to challenge what they are doing with technologies like OpenTelemetry. And the platform engineering will be providing the platform teams, they can provide these tools in a on-demand solution, a doc solution for the internal teams, reducing the cognitive load to start adopting this, or even reducing the gap between know that I should be doing this and actually doing this, right? I had the experience in the past working with development teams or string alignment teams actually, that they didn't thought before that observability was a non-functional requirement important to include there. And actually, sometimes they didn't know how to start doing anything with observability. Which tools, which technologies they can use. So with platform teams, we can provide the stable compliance solution inside the organization, with well-documented and boilerplate solutions. Templates they can restart from with the right tools, the right configurations to integrate with other platforms inside the organization to make visible the information like Grafana, Prometheus, Grafana Loki, Jaeger, Kali, right? To make everything more visible, more understandable in production. And finally, some other things I want to share today is something outside of the use of technologies, right, and practices, which is the communication inside the organization. Right? Sometimes these different teams, they are working for the value stream, but they didn't know where one start and where other start. And also they are totally disconnected. Some of the open leadership transformation I have been doing when I was part of Red Hat was communicating these different teams and generating shared goals. And shared goals can be related also with observability, ensuring that the software we are generating together is really understandable in production, is prepared to provide the right service. And observability is critical for that, right? I want to know that my software is properly logging the information. So if it crashes, right, I will be able to know what is happening there. Is the connection to the database? It's a third-party API. I had just one issue today with one team. They were asking me how I can increase the timeout of my Kubernetes deployment. So I asked him, why do you want to configure the timeout directly in your Kubernetes resources if probably it's your software which is taking too long, or it's integration that is taking too long? Did you look to the logs? Do you look to the tracing? Are you implementing tracing features to know what is happening inside, or through the cycle of the process that from a client reaching your API and receiving a response? That is crucial. So if we have shared goals across the organization, across the team, everybody connected to the end and the outcome, which is have proper products supplying the needs of our customers, and have everything there reliable and stable, observability would turn something important as well. And part of this will be outcomes, metrics, right? OKRs, KPIs, a lot of, I will say most of companies rather, are trying to use metrics. Metrics, it's super important because we cannot know where we are. We will not be able to really improve if we don't know where we are, right? So using metrics, I'm going to be able to see I'm here, right? And DORA is one of the metrics I mentioned it before, right? It's wide used and help us a lot to understand what is happening in production because the four of them are based on what is happening there, right? How much time I take to move something down to production, how much I'm deploying in production, how much takes to restore something in production, and how much phase my deployment. So the specific metric mean time to restore is, from my experience, is used sometimes wrong to help teams or enforce teams to take care of observability. And I want to stop here because sometimes metrics, they are important. Again, we cannot stop to use metrics because if not, we will not be able to really know where we are, right? And if we're improving or not. But metrics must be part of how we are progressing, where we are today, where we should be tomorrow, right? Not part of our targets, right? I have seen a lot of teams fail because they set targets of, as an example, mean time to restore, because the observability was not good in the beginning. So they defined that mean time to restore must reduce 50%, right? Setting specific numbers, right? Was not this abstract outcome that I just said, which is not bad. But they just enforce from top down changes in the observability, enforcing tools, enforcing practices to the teams that have been working a lot of time as they want, right? And at the end of the year, they fail. They had a lot of teams running into, running in circles because they didn't know how to pick something they must show in one weekend, one day, right? So improvement actions should be the target, right? How are you logging? How are you implementing the standards of logging? Which kind of technologies you are implementing as part of the design or as part of the development process to ensure that the observability is good enough to reduce the mean time to restore, the time I need to solve something in production that is messing my service, right? So this is more or less what I have prepared, right? So I'm gonna thank you for joining this conversation, this talk with me. If you have any questions, you can join me in the chat. Use the code QR to see me there, to talk with me. Maybe share with me your experience. Maybe you have something related with what I exposed today, and keep joining the skill updates and this event. Thank you very much.